Hey folks, it's Brendan in the labs at eScoot. Now I'm just going to take you through some of the NAMI specific turbo torch and also TurboTap products, and a bit of turbo throttle as well. So with the NAMI, you'll find, and also say with some of the carbo makes and models, is that the turn switches are a bit awkward to access because of the rubberized waterproof push buttons on them. You'll often leave your indicators on and that sort of thing. So we're wanting to replace this with a slider, a rocker switch that sort of pivots. You can just physically feel with your thumb where things are without needing to look down to try to see the indicators. In fact, this left indicator on this Tevron fighter here has stopped working on the status display here. It's all working down there, and it's for the right. The light switch as well is awkward. You press it once for whatever beam it throws at you, and then press it in again for the low or high alternating, and then I think maybe with some of them there's a flicker and stuff as well, but generally it's just annoying to have to switch between high and low beam. The NFC reader can be annoying, the fact that you've got to tap on and tap off to power the scooter on and off all the time. So it's nice to have a sort of a switch such as this one here to be able to bypass that NFC in some manner. I'll take you through that in a sec. And the horn switches and the light switches can fail too, because the mechanisms seem to struggle with some of the currents that go through them, particularly if you wanted to look at aftermarket lighting, that sort of stuff that draw higher current through. The throttle as well, the horizontal throttle, some people sort of prefer the vertical throttle, like the 300X and 108X, sort of swapping that over. So that's a handy thing to have with some of the turbo throttle alternative throttles that are available for the NAMI and others, carbos that adopt that external throttle. So light and horn switch, the NFC side of things, the high beaming, and then there's also no auxiliary power out. Like if you wanted to connect your phone to charge with USB, you're often resorting to hanging battery packs on and that sort of thing. And if you have an external battery pack, it would be nice to be able to charge that external battery pack when you plug your scooter in to charge the scooter. So you're not having to plug in USB plugs to external battery packs and all that sort of stuff. The external battery packs are good too, in the fact that they allow you to run some pretty decent lighting without drawing down on your scooter battery, at least for whilst you're drawing power out of the battery. So with those things in mind, the functional design progresses us from a switch to one that actually has the slider in it. The horn is a red push button, nice and easy to access horn. And the light switch is a toggle left and right. Now the left and right toggle on this is actually wide, so there's actually two outputs from the headlight. So you can have a low beam and high beam. So we introduce on the wiring harness as part of the TurboTap switch an output for low beam. So it's a high-low light and horn switch with turn slider, effectively. There's also some other outputs on the design as well, functionally, to provide the ability to plug in your front turn signals, the NAMI front turn signals. So they're a white DRL light that's on all the time, and a left and right yellow. So that would allow you to connect those straight into here without needing to get a V3 mainline and new turn signal compatible mainline you've got to run down the stem. So that's those two left and right turn outputs. They also provide power out as well, which is, is an option, which normally runs the white running lights, which are on when you power the scooter on with the NFC. This one here, the high beam, is effectively an output that comes across when you switch this to the right, and so that can then run an external high beam torch, or you could fit another one of the stock headlights fixtures. So yeah, you're using a third-party fixture or whatever. The Turbo Torch series of fixtures are sort of 3,000, 5,000 lumen replacements for the stock, or you could run them as an extra light to this. And just noting that low and high beam operation is turn on for low, turn off, turn on again for high, turn off, turn on back to low. The Turbo Torch ones actually have similar to this, an external remote button, but rather than sort of being waterproof, which has water ingress, rather than being USB-C, which has waterproofing issues, it actually works on the DC connectors. So that's these type of plugs, but actually waterproof ones that seal up and go onto the external battery. So that's about an 8 or 12,000 milliampere hour, 7.2 volt external battery. This is not exactly this one, but it's just to show concept of an external battery with 6 or 8 cells in it. This one here's probably got 4 cells, so it'd be twice the weight of that, and that's probably about 500 grams. So it'd be a kilogram of battery you'd stick in, and 7.2 volts. High current run about 30 or 30 watts, maybe more, 40 watts for the 5,000 lumens, to a really nice fixture that manages heat really well in a turbo torch. That can just basically plug in and replace that one for that red 3-pin connector on the NAMI. The DC 7.2 volt version of the headlight fixtures that support these batteries interact with the low and high beam switch on a Y cable off this 7.2 volt DC connector. So that's how that switch interacts. So potentially with the turbo torch fixtures, we can take this out to a 3-pin instead of a 2, and have that 3-pin then drive the high beam switching off this switch here, which would be nice, right? Because one light then does low and high beam switched easily. So the other thing too, I mentioned it before about those DRL running lights being on all the time. Yeah, so trying to be able to turn, move the microphone, trying to be able to move them around means that then you can use this high beam output to run, as I mentioned, a second light, or switch a high beam on a more proficient light if that wiring design works. But there's then also the harness here, which connects on your light and horn switch as a pass through and breaks out. Headlight isolation harness. So that allows you then to isolate your headlights, so that, because this switch is only low and high beam now, you actually don't have a light on and off switch with this newer instrumentation. That's where this harness comes in. It's just got 3 wires on it. One plugs into the light switch, one plugs into your harness where the light switch would have plugged in, and it throws out another a loop or 2 to go to an auxiliary switch. The first button can then turn the headlight on or off. Now, if we get the wiring right with the 3-pin connector, that same switch can be used to bypass the NFC, to turn your scooter on and off without needing the NFC. And there's ways and means that one can make this switch just not do any NFC bypassing, but provide that light switching functionality if that's so desired. There's a method of doing that. The other switch on this dual switch is an auxiliary switch. So that just provides external power out, which is always on, and that allows then you to drive a TurboTap buck converter, which delivers 12 volts, so you can run things like quick charge USB chargers quite happily. So first switch is for lights on and off as like an override or NFC bypass. And I think if you didn't want to use the NFC functionality of this, but you wanted to use the light functionality, then it would just be a simple matter of unplugging this switch's wire from the NFC to this isolation harness for the headlight. And so you can basically dual purpose it, one or the other. If you wanted both, light and NFC and auxiliary, then I guess you just get another instrumentation, another one of these. So you've got 4 switches. Purpose the first buttons in for light and NFC accordingly. And so it just gives you 2 auxiliary outputs. So an auxiliary output, one to perhaps be for your phone charger off your buck converter, and then another one perhaps to run an additional headlight. Really it's going to depend on what the switching circuits are in the headlight fixture itself, As I mentioned, the NAMI was low and then alternates to high. And then what methods you have within your fixture, and I'm yet to sort of see exactly how the turbo torch ones implement with regards to the remote switch. But the general principle is that these remote switches are hard to use, they're hard to mount, the real estate's limited. So we really want to use this rubberized toggle switch here, which is nice and positive, to flick between low and high. In that, if we can sort of put a bonus in to turn off the DRL running lights at the same time with this switch, yeah, fantastic. Yet to sort of look at all that in more detail, but regardless, the modular, so the switch with the harness is all wired together and gives you, 4 or 5, 6 different outlets on it instead of just the one. So it opens up a lot of alternatives. As I mentioned, you can use your front turn signals natively on these, run a high beam or some other auxiliary output off this switch. The TurboTap light NFC auxiliary switch can connect to the NFC, okay, in line with the 3-pin, or those same 3 pins off the light horn switch isolation harness to turn your headlights on and off. That's the dual purpose you could switch it to. This one here then, the second switch, you could say perhaps it's not needed because an auxiliary output can be just provided full-time, all the time power, or when the NFC is turned on, or the scooter's turned on, so power on or always on, as a wire that can come out with a plug on it from here and here. So if it doesn't need to be switched, then we could do that, in which case then we just purpose these as NFC. And if you don't want the NFC, you can put a little patch cable in, which basically takes out the NFC wire of one of the 3 pins, disables it, so you can essentially disable that functionality. You can plug it in when you need to, do you know what I mean? You can just do it that way. And so then this second one can be purposed for the light. And so if you wanted auxiliary output power, you'd actually already have it available through some other outputs that are on these various harnesses or switches. Or we could look at a third product which focuses just on that auxiliary switching and that sort of stuff, and then that can be used in combination with things like the USB and that sort of stuff. It doesn't go anywhere near the NFC, but still looks after the lights, and then gives you the ability to repurpose that would otherwise be disabled NFC. So I'm interested to know if people really want this idea of pushing this button down to bypass the NFC and then pushing it off. And I'll show you what that switch is planned to be looking like in a sec, because they're not just on or off, they're actually off, on and on, sort of 3 position. The buck converters. Okay, so charging with USB, they've actually come a long way now in that you can actually get them that will have a USB-C port power draw, which is that type there, as well as a USB-A. And USB-A is a Qualcomm quick charge, USB-C is a power draw, so they're delivering, near about 30 watts or so. So to maintain those, these, when you see them on ALI Express, and they support 72 volts, they're using an external buck converter, right? So that just plugs in there. Now these, not exactly waterproof, they look ugly, so we wouldn't go with those. And they also, at least in this version, and I'll have to check if the others apply, but I think it's all the same, is that it actually can't deliver the required current to maintain power draw or quick charge. So you don't get fast charging out of it, even though it's fast charging capable. If they're connected to a 12 volt circuit, no worries, 12 volts, fast charge. But the buck converter I suggest, it's pretty light, and it actually, when I tap it, it springs like it's tensioned, is probably not the best professional way to do it. They are nice and small though, these ones. So having awareness of that, we'll also look at the meter. These have got a voltage meter on them, but they're always going to read 12 volts because the buck converter is always providing 12 volts. So you don't want a voltage meter. So you can get, obviously, without voltage meter this style, which is very small in real estate. I use these myself on the Manus. and they're just USB-C. I don't know if there's USB-A. I don't know if there's a Type-C in them, but anyway, they haven't progressed. What has progressed well is this type. This is the go-to now. There's no display inside that receptacle there, and they have a switch on the front, which is really easy to use. And the switch is just there out of convenience if you wanted to turn something on or off. It's not really like you turn that off and you save power, because your buck converter is going to be either on the always on output or the switched output. That is power on switch. So when the scooter's powered on, then when this switch is turned on, you've got power output. As opposed to, there's always power going to the switch. When you turn the switch on, it comes on. The scooter doesn't need to be turned on in order for that to flow. The problem with that is always on is that it's going to draw down a little bit here on your battery reserve, because these buck converters have a very small standby voltage running through a bit of current. Not much though, not much. So that's where you come back to the two switches and for two auxiliary outs, one that's power on based and one that's actually always on. And the always on one is the one that you might want to turn on and have on always when your scooter's off, when you're charging. So when your scooter's charging, you've got the switch on, it'll charge your external batteries for that. And then once it's charged and all that, press the button here and the buck converter turns off. Oh, yeah, if you're charging batteries off your buck converter turns off. And so then that's not drawing any power. So then your headlight's running off your external battery, not the internal battery. If you did turn that on mid-ride, then you can start to draw power off the batteries and concurrently charge the battery while you're running the headlight, just assuming your battery pack supports that. So that just gives you an option where you've got heaps of battery in the scooter, but you want heaps of light and you want to run the full, 5,000 lumens or so. You're not going to have enough battery reserve in your external battery pack. So you're going to start to charge the battery pack from your scooter battery while you're riding. So it just gives you a few options. On the USB dashboard ports, we talked about the switch here, how it would operate. Some of the other products that we looked at had a switch on the back, which I guess you can get to, but I found them to be awkward to position your finger on because they've got this waterproof hood. So whilst these ones were nice and slim and small, the only aspect I've taken out of this in the design is the USB-C and USB-A. USB-C, nice and small, probably a little bit more waterproof, dustproof. This one doesn't actually have a cover on it to protect it from weatherproofing, even though it's got that on the front. When you slide that in to put the cover on, it's on there, but it doesn't really seem to be too good because it only sort of just provides, it's like in the USB Type A, they haven't designed the waterproofing to the USB-C, so there's all these gaps in here where moisture can get in. So that wouldn't cut the mustard. These ones do. This switch is on the top. Look, it's probably a bit easier to access than this one, but it's effectively still got that rubber over it, which is a bit awkward, particularly when you've got gloves on and stuff. It's got a nice LED light here, which normally runs up when it's on. This one's got the voltage meter, which I assume when you turn it on, the voltage meter comes on, so you know it's turned on that way. These ones without the voltage meter probably don't have any light to let you know they're on, but you can't go wrong. It's on and off, up and down. These ones left and right, they're not too hard as well. But this one's, because on the back it's a bit non-intuitive as to left or right, what's on or off, as you look at it this way or that way. So they're off the design list. All the stock buck converters are off the design list. That one I could probably test to see if the buck, but I don't think it, and it doesn't have that, so they're all scrap. That's it, right? There's one other one maybe I've got coming, but yeah, this with the USB-C and A, Qualcomm Quick Charge and Power Draw. Buck converter wise, look, these are in an aluminium case. These are sort of fully molded. They're all waterproof. I've just got some other little smaller enclosure 3 amp ones coming, which are almost like the 1 amp ones in size, and so they might be a better option. But either way, there's a buck converter. So the buck converter's got the red 2-pin connector to go onto the switch, and another red 2-pin connector to go into a USB module, the USB dash. So that's one product. That's another product. You know about the turbo torch stuff and that sort of thing, how they just plug into the existing harness. The TurboTap turn switch, the TurboTap headlight isolation switch to bring in that light switching functionality, and then that one there's your light, or your light/NFC auxiliary switch, which will be either dual purpose like it's shown here, or separate, so that there's just an NFC switch and then the other switch does light and auxiliary, or maybe light, NFC and 2 auxiliaries, an always on auxiliary and a powered on auxiliary, which I think is probably a nicer way to do it. So it just basically comes down to whether or not you want to have that NFC bypass functionality in there, and as I say, we can adapt that with these. Anyway, if we wanted to change the purpose of that NFC, but it just means the switch is probably there, does nothing, unless I can dual purpose it to do the headlight. But then the problem is with the headlight, then you can't run both that as a headlight, and that's maybe 2 switches. I don't know. I've just got to do some more wiring diagrams to work out what's possible there. The throttle conversion cable. Okay, so this is the turbo throttle, which allows you to connect your standard sort of Wuxing e-bike throttles, the rapid KT bolt standard, which is different to what's used by NAMI and Cabot systems. So that just plugs straight in there, and that goes into your wiring harness on your NAMI, and you can change your throttle with a plug and play conversion. Just swaps those wires around internally in there. The other thing we had too was, I now call it the TurboTap IoT immobilizer for NAMI. It resides inside the deck, plugs into your controller, taps into where the display throttle or the display harness connects, and off that it provides power for a GPS tracker. So that's your sort of 72 volt on the red line for the power. Orange is accessories on, so when your scooter's turned on, so the GPS tracker knows the scooter's turned on, because it does things when it's turned on, and it can show the status that someone's turned your scooter on. And then the other 2 wires are, well, obviously negative is black, and then there's a relay immobilizer. So when that's when the IoT tracker's relay immobilizer is turned on, it flows power through this this wire, the yellow, I believe, and activates this relay. This relay then cuts the signal from the display throttle to the controller, so it will throw up an error, comms error, and there's no throttle. It's immobilized. So that allows you then just to plug that in to your existing harness in the deck, plug your GPS tracker IoT device into there, and this relay does the work. And that relay is designed so that it doesn't draw power on the relay. Not that it's a lot, but still, it's just not sitting there running with the coil driven when it's immobilized. It's only when you turn the scooter on, or NFC tap it on, or whatever you do to power on the scooter, then this relay activates, the power flows through it, and it switches the contacts over to disable the power through there. And there's also a flyback protection diode in there as well, because when you're switching relays on and off, you can damage your switching circuits, which is in the display, power on, power off, or the NFC, with flyback. So that's just to protect flyback protection. So I think that's about it. I think I've covered everything. I think I've got now this modular concept of different parts and how they interconnect, and then what needs to be designed to make things interoperable with each other, but still be flexible, trying to still conform to the NAMI stock standard with regards to the plugs and pinouts and the wiring colours that are used as well in the wiring harness. I'm happy with that switch. A few people on some of the Facebook groups sort of suggested that they have tried other switches and they've come to the conclusion this is the one. There is another one I saw here which has a 3-position light, off, parkers and driving lights, I guess. And then this is then just a low and high beam. That particular switch has a slider, but it's a rocker. There's a slider left and right, whereas this one sort of pivots. So I think this is the better, more relaxed way of, more positive way of switching than the slider. So yeah, that's about it. I don't think there's anything else to add. I was going to actually just show you quickly this. Where is it? Because we're at half an hour. I don't know if I got them there. I'll just put this up here. There you go. So that's the switches. So note you can get on off, or you can get on and on. With the NFC bypass, this is handy because when people try to turn everything on to immobilize things, or demobilize things, I should say, if they're stealing your scooter, typically you turn the switch on. But in this instance, if you switch it to what's shown here is a 2 position, pushing up, that's going to turn the scooter on. Whereas if you push it down, it makes no difference between 0 and 1. Or the switch could be used for another purpose in that other position. But either way, there's 1, 2, 3 positions there available, and only one of those positions would immobilize. So you could almost even do a combination lock with them, in that this one has to be on and that one has to be in the on in the up position, and that one's down, and when it's in that position, it will then activate or deactivate the immobilizer on the NFC. All right, stay tuned, but they're the switches. They are probably the best looking switches I've seen, and that's definitely the best looking USB dashboard that I've seen. So as to whether or not any of this works with Carbo, I don't know, but we'll just start with NAMI first. Probably won't work for the Stella because the NFC is internal on the dashboard. Maybe some other parts will, but people with Stellas aren't really interested in going to this level. This is sort of more for people that ride a lot more and want really good switching instrumentation going on. So yeah, that's them. Righto, I shall check you later.